Other than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates, the famous names in the tech world, do you know that a different group of innovators has been quietly building billion-dollar tech empires? They've connected entire continents to mobile networks, created software used by millions of businesses, and helped shape the strategies of Silicon Valley giants. The surprising part? Most people have never even heard their names. Today, we're revealing 5 black tech billionaires whose influence is far bigger than their fame. Strive Masiyiwa, the first name on this list, might actually surprise you. Because long before Africa's tech boom, before the continent became a hotspot for startups and venture capital, one man was already fighting to build the infrastructure that would power that future. That man is Strive Masiyiwa, and his journey into tech didn't start in a fancy Silicon Valley office. It started in a courtroom. Back in the early 1990s, Masiyiwa had a bold idea. He wanted to launch a private telecommunications company in Zimbabwe. At the time, that idea sounded almost impossible. Why? Because the government controlled the entire telecom sector. If you wanted to run a phone network, you needed state approval, and Masiyiwa wasn't getting it. Most entrepreneurs would have walked away at that point. But Masiyiwa believed something many people didn't yet understand. The future of Africa would be powered by connectivity. Mobile phones were still a luxury. Internet access was rare. But Masiyiwa saw a future where millions of people across the continent would rely on telecommunications for business, education, and daily life. So instead of giving up, he did something almost unheard of. He sued the government. Yes, an entrepreneur taking his own government to court. For 5 long years, Masiyiwa battled Zimbabwe's leadership in a legal fight that drained his resources and tested his determination. Friends warned him that the fight was too risky. Investors stayed away. The odds were stacked heavily against him, but Masiyiwa stayed in the fight. Finally, in 1997, the country's Supreme Court ruled in his favor. The decision changed everything. With that victory, Masiyiwa launched Econet Wireless, and almost immediately the company began reshaping Africa's telecom industry. Here's the part most people don't realize. At the time, many global telecom giants ignored African markets. They assumed the continent was too risky, too poor, or too complicated for large-scale investment. Masiyiwa saw the opposite. He saw opportunity. Econet expanded rapidly, building mobile networks across multiple African countries. Suddenly, people who had never owned a phone before could communicate with family, run businesses, and access information in ways that were previously impossible. And as mobile technology spread across Africa, Econet became one of the companies helping make it happen. But Masiyiwa wasn't just building phone networks. He was building an entire digital ecosystem. Through the broader Econet group, his business interests expanded into fiber infrastructure, mobile banking, satellite connectivity, and renewable energy. These weren't random investments. They were strategic moves designed to support Africa's growing digital economy. Today, Masiyiwa's companies operate across multiple continents, serving millions of customers and generating billions in revenue. But what makes his story even more remarkable is the influence he has outside of business. Masiyiwa has become one of Africa's most respected philanthropists. Through scholarship programs and education initiatives, he and his family have supported thousands of African students pursuing university education around the world. For many of those students, the opportunity completely changed their lives. And then there's another layer to Masiyiwa's influence that many people overlook: his presence in global tech leadership. Over the years, he has served on advisory boards and corporate boards for major global organizations, including the streaming giant Netflix. That means the same entrepreneur who once struggled just to start a telecom company in Zimbabwe now sits in rooms where global technology strategy is discussed. Think about that journey for a moment. From fighting a government monopoly to helping shape the future of international technology companies. But maybe the most important thing Masiyiwa built wasn't just a telecom empire. It was a belief that African entrepreneurs could build global companies, belief that innovation could thrive outside Silicon Valley, and the belief that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs begin with one person refusing to accept the word no. And as you're about to see, Masiyiwa isn't the only entrepreneur quietly building billion-dollar influence in the tech world. Because the next name on our list started with something much simpler. A calendar problem that turned into a multi-billion-dollar company. Tope Awotona. If you've ever tried scheduling a meeting with someone in a different time zone, you probably know how frustrating it can be. One email goes out. "Are you free Tuesday?" The reply comes back. "Tuesday doesn't work, how about Thursday?" Then another message follows. "Actually, Thursday might not work either." Before you know it, 10 emails have gone back and forth just to schedule a 30-minute conversation. It's a small problem, but one that millions of professionals deal with every single day. Now imagine turning that everyday frustration into a company worth billions. That's exactly what Tope Awotona did. And interestingly enough, his journey into tech didn't begin with venture capital, Silicon Valley connections, or a famous startup accelerator. It began with something much more personal. Awotona was born in Nigeria, where his father worked as a microbiologist and entrepreneur. His father believed strongly in education, discipline, and building something meaningful in life. But when Tope was still a teenager, tragedy struck. His father was killed during a robbery. The loss shook the family deeply, and it became a turning point in Awotona's life. Eventually, his family moved to the United States, where he would continue his education and begin figuring out what kind of future he wanted to build. At first, tech entrepreneurship wasn't part of the plan. Awotona worked in sales for several companies, learning how businesses operate and how products are marketed to customers. But during those years, one problem kept appearing again and again: scheduling meetings. Sales professionals live in meetings. Calls with clients, demos, presentations, follow-ups. And every one of those meetings required the same frustrating email exchange, just to find a time that worked. Awotona started thinking about a simple solution. What if there was a tool that could automatically show someone your available time slots? No endless email chains, no confusion, just a link where someone could instantly book a time. The idea sounded simple, but building the product required something most aspiring founders struggle with: risk. Awotona invested nearly all of his personal savings to build the first version of what would eventually become Calendly. There were no massive funding rounds at the beginning, no headlines announcing a hot new startup. For a long time, Calendly grew quietly. But that quiet growth was actually the secret. And every time someone used Calendly to schedule a meeting, the recipient saw how easy the process was. And naturally, many of them started using the tool themselves. In other words, every scheduled meeting became a form of marketing. This created a powerful viral loop. One person sends a Calendly link. The other person signs up. Then they send their own link to someone else. Slowly but steadily, the user base began to explode. Professionals across industries started adopting the tool. Recruiters, consultants, freelancers, sales teams, and even educators began relying on it to manage their schedules. Banned. Then something interesting happened. Major companies began using it too. Organizations like Zoom Video Communications and Twilio integrated scheduling workflows that relied on tools like Calendly. What started as a simple productivity idea was quickly becoming a critical part of how modern businesses operate. Eventually, investors took notice. In 2021, Calendly raised a major funding round that valued the company at over $3 billion. Suddenly, the quiet scheduling tool that had spread organically across the internet became one of the most successful software companies in the productivity space. And the Nigerian-born founder who built it largely outside the spotlight had officially joined the ranks of tech billionaires. But Awotona's story isn't just about money, it's about simplicity. While some of the biggest tech companies in the world try to solve incredibly complex problems involving artificial intelligence, robotics, or space exploration, Calendly solved something much smaller: a calendar. Yet that small improvement removed friction from millions of professional interactions every single day. Think about that for a moment. Every job interview is scheduled, every sales call is booked, every consultation is arranged. Behind many of those interactions, there's a simple link created by Calendly, and that link represents a powerful lesson in entrepreneurship. Sometimes the biggest opportunities aren't hidden in complicated technologies or futuristic ideas. Sometimes they're hiding inside everyday frustrations that millions of people experience, but no one has solved properly yet. And as you'll see with the next person on our list, some of the most influential figures in tech aren't always founders. Sometimes, the people shaping the industry's future are the strategic minds operating behind the scenes of the world's biggest technology companies. Archibong. Now here's something interesting. Not every powerful figure in the tech world is a founder. Some of the most influential people shaping the industry are the strategists behind the scenes, the executives making the decisions that determine how platforms grow, which partnerships succeed, and where billions of users will spend their time online. And one of those quiet power players is Archibong. If the name doesn't immediately ring a bell, that's actually part of the point. Because while the world knows figures like Mark Zuckerberg, there are leaders inside major tech companies whose influence is enormous, even though they rarely stand in the spotlight. And Archibong is one of them. Archibong grew up in Los Angeles in a Nigerian-American household that valued curiosity, education, and ambition. His parents encouraged him to explore how things worked, from science and engineering to technology. That curiosity eventually led him to Yale University, where he studied engineering. But what made Archibong stand out wasn't just technical knowledge. It was his ability to think strategically about how technology ecosystems work, how companies collaborate, how platforms scale, and how partnerships shape the future of innovation. That skill became incredibly valuable. Because after graduating, Archibong joined Facebook during one of the most important growth periods in the company's history. At the time, Facebook wasn't just trying to grow its user base. It was trying to become a global platform where developers, businesses, and creators could all build products. And that's where Archibong came in. Instead of focusing only on building internal tools, he worked on something bigger: partnerships. His job involved building relationships between Facebook and the thousands of developers, startups, and technology companies integrating with the platform. Think about it this way. Every time an app connects to Facebook's login system, every time a developer builds a tool that works with Facebook's platform, every time a company launches a feature that relies on Facebook's ecosystem, there's an entire strategic framework behind it. Archibong helped shape that framework. Over time, his influence inside the company grew. Eventually, he rose to become vice president of product partnerships at what is now Meta Platforms. That position placed him at the center of some of the company's most important collaborations. He worked closely with developers, startups, and major technology firms to help expand the platform's capabilities and global reach. And here's why that role matters more than people might think. Technology platforms don't grow alone. They grow through ecosystems. Smartphones exploded in popularity because developers built millions of apps. Streaming services grew because content creators filled them with shows and movies. And social platforms expand because businesses and developers integrate their tools into the system. Executives like Archibong are the architects of those ecosystems. They decide which partnerships move forward, which collaborations get prioritized, and how companies work together to build new technologies. In other words, they help shape the invisible infrastructure behind the digital world. But Archibong's impact doesn't stop inside boardrooms. He has also become a strong advocate for diversity and representation in the tech industry. For years, Silicon Valley has struggled with the lack of representation for Black engineers and entrepreneurs. Archibong has used his position to mentor young technologists, encourage innovation, and support programs designed to open doors for the next generation. Because for him, success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It's about making sure more people have the opportunity to climb it too. And that perspective makes his influence even more important. Think about the scale for a moment. Billions of people use products built by Meta Platforms every day. Behind that massive digital ecosystem are teams of engineers, designers, and strategists shaping how those platforms evolve. And among them is a Nigerian-American executive whose work has quietly helped guide some of the biggest technology platforms in the world. Not through flashy headlines, not through viral announcements, but through strategy, partnerships, and long-term thinking. And as powerful as that influence is, the next person on our list represents a completely different side of the tech revolution. Because across Africa, a new generation of entrepreneurs is building financial technology companies that are transforming how millions of people send, receive, and manage money. Agbeze Ifeanyi. While Silicon Valley often dominates global tech headlines, something equally transformative has been happening thousands of miles away. Across Africa, a quiet financial revolution has been unfolding. Millions of people who once had little or no access to traditional banking services are now sending money, paying bills, and running businesses entirely from their phones. At the center of this transformation is the rapidly growing fintech sector, and one of the emerging figures connected to that movement is Agbeze Ifeanyi. Now here's why this story matters. For decades, large portions of Africa's population were considered unbanked. Opening a traditional bank account could be difficult, expensive, or simply impossible for many people living outside major cities. But technology changed the equation. Mobile payments, digital wallets, and online financial platforms began replacing the need for physical bank branches. Suddenly, a smartphone could function as a complete financial hub. Entrepreneurs across the continent recognized the opportunity. Instead of trying to replicate Western banking systems, they started building entirely new financial infrastructures designed specifically for African markets. That's where builders like Ifeanyi come into the picture. Unlike the celebrity founders that dominate tech news, many of the people shaping Africa's fintech boom operate quietly behind the scenes. They build payment infrastructure, design transaction systems, and develop platforms capable of supporting millions of users. And those systems are powering a wave of startups that investors are paying very close attention to. Cities like Lagos, Nairobi, and Cape Town have rapidly become major centers of tech innovation. In fact, Lagos in particular has earned a reputation as one of Africa's most important startup ecosystems, producing fintech companies that process billions of dollars in transactions each year. Behind that growth are engineers, founders, and operators helping build the systems that make digital finance possible. Agbeze Ifeanyi is part of that movement. His involvement in Africa's fintech ecosystem places him among a new generation of innovators focused on solving real financial challenges faced by millions of people. Think about the scale of the opportunity. Africa is home to more than 1.4 billion people. A large percentage of that population is young, entrepreneurial, and increasingly connected through smartphones. For many of these users, fintech platforms are their first experience with structured financial services. Instead of visiting a physical bank, they download an app. Instead of carrying cash, they send digital payments. Instead of waiting days for cross-border transfers, transactions can happen almost instantly. The companies enabling these services are attracting enormous investor interest. Major venture capital firms such as Sequoia Capital and Tiger Global Management have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into African fintech startups over the past few years. Some of these companies have reached what investors call unicorn status, meaning they are valued at over $1 billion. And here's the fascinating part. Many of these startups didn't simply copy financial systems from Europe or the United States. Instead, they built solutions tailored to African realities. Mobile-first banking, low transaction fees, platforms designed for people who may never have used traditional banks before. That kind of innovation is what's driving the continent's fintech explosion. Entrepreneurs like Ifeanyi are helping build the infrastructure that allows these platforms to scale from payment gateways to financial integration systems that connect businesses with digital payment networks. And as Africa's digital economy continues to expand, the importance of that infrastructure will only grow. Because behind every successful fintech app is a complex network of systems that process transactions securely, reliably, and at enormous scale. Those systems don't appear in headlines, but they power the entire industry, which is exactly why the builders behind them are becoming some of the most influential figures in the global tech landscape. And yet, even with all this innovation happening across startups and emerging markets, the tech industry also depends on another type of leader. The seasoned executive. The strategist who guides billion-dollar companies through moments of transformation. And the final name on our list is someone who helped steer one of the most powerful technology companies on the planet after one of its most legendary founders stepped aside. John Thompson. Now for the final name on this list. This one is particularly fascinating because it reminds us that in the tech industry, founders aren't the only people shaping the future. Sometimes, the most important decisions are made in boardrooms, far away from product launches and viral headlines. Decisions about leadership, about strategy, about where one of the world's most powerful technology companies goes next. And few people have held that level of influence like John Thompson. If you're not deeply familiar with the corporate side of the tech world, you might not immediately recognize his name. But there's a good chance you use technology shaped by his decisions every single day. Thompson's journey into tech leadership started decades ago at IBM, one of the original giants of the computing world. He joined the company as an engineer and spent nearly 30 years climbing through the organization. Over time, he developed a reputation not just for technical expertise, but for strategic leadership. IBM was known for producing some of the most disciplined executives in the tech industry, and Thompson became one of them. But his biggest leadership moment came later. After leaving IBM, Thompson became the CEO of Symantec, a company focused on digital security. At the time, cybersecurity was becoming one of the most important issues in the tech world. As businesses moved their operations online, protecting digital information became critical. Under Thompson's leadership, Symantec expanded its influence and became one of the dominant cybersecurity companies in the world. Products like Norton Antivirus became household names, protecting millions of computers across the globe. But the most pivotal chapter of Thompson's career was still ahead. In 2014, he stepped into one of the most influential positions in the tech industry: Chairman of Microsoft. And here's why that moment mattered. For decades, Microsoft had been defined by its legendary co-founder Bill Gates. Gates had built the company into one of the most powerful software empires in history. But the tech world was changing rapidly. Cloud computing was reshaping how businesses operated. Mobile technology was redefining how people interacted with software. And Microsoft was entering a period where it needed to evolve. Thompson played a key role during this transition. One of the most important decisions he helped guide was the appointment of Satya Nadella as the company's new chief executive officer. At the time, Nadella wasn't the obvious public choice, but the decision would prove to be one of the most important leadership moves in Microsoft's modern history. Under Nadella's leadership and with Thompson serving as chairman, Microsoft underwent a dramatic transformation. Instead of focusing solely on traditional software products like Windows, the company aggressively expanded into cloud computing. That strategy led to the rise of Microsoft Azure, which quickly became one of the world's most powerful cloud platforms. Today, Azure powers everything from global businesses to government infrastructure and artificial intelligence systems. The company's value skyrocketed as a result. In fact, Microsoft eventually re-emerged as one of the most valuable companies on the planet. And while CEOs often receive the spotlight, chairmen play a critical role behind the scenes, guiding leadership decisions, shaping long-term strategy, and ensuring that companies stay focused on the future. That's the role Thompson played. A steady hand during one of the most important transitions in Microsoft's history. But beyond corporate strategy, Thompson's legacy carries another layer of significance: representation. For decades, the highest levels of leadership in Silicon Valley lacked diversity. Seeing a Black executive chair one of the most powerful technology companies in the world sent a powerful message about what leadership in tech could look like. It showed that influence in the industry doesn't belong to one background, one culture, or one region. Innovation and leadership can come from anywhere. And when you look back at the 5 names on this list, that idea becomes even clearer. From a telecom pioneer connecting Africa, to a Nigerian entrepreneur building a billion-dollar productivity tool, to a strategist guiding one of the largest digital platforms on Earth, to fintech builders transforming financial access across a continent, and finally, to the executive who helped steer Microsoft into a new era. These leaders may not dominate headlines the way other tech figures do, but their impact on the global technology landscape is undeniable. And chances are, the technology you use every day has been shaped directly or indirectly by their work. That's it about black tech innovators who you probably didn't know about quietly shaping the future, from telecom empires in Africa to billion-dollar software used around the world. Which one surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, smash that like button if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe for more stories.